Welcome to the Open Global Mind weekly call on Thursday, October 9th, 2025. Last week, in lieu of a check-in, which is what we normally do on the first Thursdays of every month, we started talking about OGM and our process and our protocols and how we go about doing stuff. A conversation which went really nicely and took us into some really interesting questions that are beyond the immediate needs of how do we do what we do, but rather how do online communities actually communicate, and where is this whole damn thing going, and how does AI factor into the mix in a productive way? So I'd like to continue that quest today. I'd like to see where we go. A couple people, Thorbjorn Mann and John Warner, sent very thoughtful replies to my invite to this topic to the OGM list, which I was just kind of reviewing. And I'm wondering if there's if anybody has any afterthoughts from last week or just on the topic in general. I just want to open the floor and see what's on our minds about this. Yeah, and here's John. Stacy, please.
Well, I just had one afterthought, and Jesse actually covered it really well. But
energy runs with this.
Is there an echo?
That was John, and he's in his car on his phone, so I just muted his line.
Oh, as long as it's not.
No worries, John. It's not anybody invading the call.
The idea of Facebook had come up, as a negative, and I just wanted to point out that my understanding is that when Facebook was developed, it was developed for them. And the idea of developing a platform for yourself, I think, was an important piece to that aligns with what Jesse was explaining about the way women create. So I just wanted to make that parallel. Like, I know there's so many negatives to Facebook, but I think the negatives came in when the idea of monetizing something came in. So I just wanted to bring it back to creating for community.
That is a lovely thing to bring back into the conversation. I really appreciate that. And my memory of the Facebook birth story is that Zuckerberg created an app to basically find, excuse the language, hot babes on the Harvard campus.
Yeah.
That was the original purpose of Face Smash, I think is what it was called originally. Because when you get to campuses like that, you often, at least you used to, you would get a Facebook. We also called it the pig book because I went to Penn for a while, and it has photos and names of all the people in your class, and you use it to figure out who the heck is that I'm seeing down the hall or whatever. Anyway, so Stacy, the birth story of Facebook is the opposite of the energy that you and Jesse were sort of bringing into the room, which I would love to explore much more.
Well, but the point I want to make is, yes, there's that negative there,
Yeah.
but there's always two pieces to everything. So while I want to throw out the negative, I don't want to lose the positive piece to it.
which, if I'm going to reinterpret, correct me if I'm wrong, which is they built something that was useful for them. That
Yes.
it was useful for a group of people trying to get something done, which I totally agree with. The best software pre-enshittification is software that helps people get something done they really, really want to do. And there's an open question right now about, and I don't think this will apply to the big software communication platforms, but there's an open question right now about, will we be looking at apps in the App Store anymore? Or will we just talk to AI, to our AI agent, which then generates ad hoc software that we need to get something done? This kind of obviates persistent software like a community, because if you can't whip up new software every time you need to talk to your buddies, because you need to have been talking to them over time. I think that we'll just whip it up in a moment's notice model doesn't work at all for anything with some history or something like that. But there's this open question that AI is going to get rid of the need to have specialty small purpose software apps, because it'll just go, oh, I can do that, and here's a new app. Gil.
Oh, I can do that, but without the quality control.
that you might find with a professional software shop. I mean,
Oh, for sure.
I've been playing a lot with AI, and it takes a lot of iterations to get it to where I want it to get to. Um,
Right.
but back to the platforms for them, platforms for us, et cetera. Um, what I'm wondering is enshittification tightly correlated with monetization?
I so I think
And the related question is, how do you build something that has the appropriate reach for what's trying to be done, and can be sustained economically in the course of doing that without falling into the enshittification machine?
yes, and I think that's one of the big questions here is it possible to have viable, sustainable, ongoing concern software that doesn't need to go down the enshittification rat hole?
And related to that, does it, if so factor, depend on volunteer labor to sustain, which means that the volunteers have to have sources of income from somewhere else. So they're maybe tied into the enshittification machine for most of their lives and do volunteer good work, which is lovely. And it's how we've gotten a lot of the open source, brilliance of the last 50 years, but it's not a sustainable strategy.
Um, yes, and oh, lost my thought. Other thoughts? I'm sort of checking in for those of you who just joined the call. Kevin, Jose, I'm asking, are there any afterthoughts from last week's call or about this topic in general? So we're just kind of setting the stage for our conversation.
I wasn't here last week, so I'm not sure that I have any thoughts yet.
No worries. Thanks.
I think John asked a really interesting set of questions in the email that I'd like to, his questions would be better than the one I come up with.
I agree. John, thank you. You and Thorbjorn sent really thoughtful notes to the retreat list. And I'm going to actually copy paste your note into the chat, which I think will blow the chat. Let's see if it blows the chat text limit. Yes, I have to cut it in half. Hold on. There we go. That, and of course it didn't do any of the carriage returns. Sorry about that. But John, if you're near your device, would you like to talk about what you posted? And oh, good.
Yeah, sorry. I I don't know quite what to say that wouldn't just be repeating what I wrote, but I understand not everybody that's on the call has seen the email.
I just pasted into the chat, although it doesn't look as nice as in your email, but it is
Yeah.
available to everybody on this call right now.
I mean, the main theme of what I was getting at is, for me, it was a bit of an epiphany, and I'm sure that others, this occurred to others, long ago, but in more than one setting, not just OGM, I'm having this experience where I personally am doing a lot with Chat GPT, just as my own internal, you know, feedback device, cogitation device, whatever. But I'm seeing more and more, like in the OGM list and elsewhere, where people are having, like these revealing, experiences by one-on-one explorations with AI. And understandably, like, we're wanting to share that with others, but so many of us are doing it, like, we don't really have time, to fully digest, like, I'm having my own conversations. I don't know that I have it, whether it's a matter of interest, time, whatever, bandwidth, you just kind of like, it's all we can do to get through our own busy days and busy schedules. So it's like when someone shares, hey, here's the, you know, 2,000, 4,000 word, exchange that I had, which was probably even an excerpt, right? Because it's like the words pile up pretty quick, with an exchange back and forth and a, dialogue through a 1 hour hike or something, like what I'm doing occasionally with Chat GPT. And anyway, so the main point was, how do we share it? And the other day was just kind of the first time that this light bulb went on in my head, that it was like, Well, I guess you got to back up and ask, like, why are we all having one-on-ones with Chat GPT? Like, why aren't we having conversations like this where not just Chat GPT, but you guys get what I mean? Like
Sure.
where the LLM is just a participant in the conversation. So that kind of prompted me to ask Chat GPT, like, well, how far off is that? Because I hadn't even really thought about it, you know? And the response I got was, oh yeah, you know, like that's in the pipeline, and it's, you know, maybe a couple of years away because there's a lot to it. But it just really got me thinking about, that's going to be a different chapter of this deal than what we're currently in. And maybe in a way it tempers some of the, you know, the internal frustrations where we're bombarding each other with these, you know, loquacious, you know, exchanges, because we really want to share it, right? Like, because we really feel like we are having some, you know, like intellectual insights and breakthroughs, and so there's a strong desire to share it, but the bandwidth, personal individual bandwidth, just isn't there for each of us to share all this stuff. So anyway.
John, thank you for that. That helps and amplifies what you said online. And I'm going to make an analogy that may or may not work for you, but because I use the brain and do mind mapping, but I also talk to people who do Kumu system maps and all this and all that. And my experience of other people's maps, and this may ring a bell for people. My experience of other people's maps is that maps that they think are really profound and explain a lot are often impenetrable to me or need to be unpacked really slowly, which takes time. The times that it works best, like with Gene Bellinger, are when Gene starts with a little piece of the story and then he adds on a loop and then he adds on a piece over here and then he basically builds it out, which takes the effort on both of our sides. He has to go back. Once he's elaborated a large map, he has to go back and figure out how do I then unpack this for people. And I think what's happening in LLMs is that these LLMs are very capable of taking us down really fruitful and interesting paths. A couple of years ago, early in this Gen AI era, I went to pi.ai. It said, "What's on your mind?" I answered that, and I proceeded in 90 minutes to have the best interview I've ever had with anybody. And I think I've mentioned this in an OGM call before, but what it kept doing was it would say, "Oh, it sounds like you said this," and it would raise the conversation. "Do you mean this?" And I'd be like, yeah, that. And then it would do it again. It was not just doing Eliza back to me. It wasn't a stochastic parrot. It was somehow deeply understanding what I was up to. And I was like, oh my God. And I haven't actually gone back to that thread. I think it sort of shook me a little bit because I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate this new set of AIs into my life more, which is a whole different conversation. But I say all that because many of us are having these exciting conversations, and then we share them in to our media, which tends to be at this point the OGM list. And then it's a lot of words. It's a couple thousand words, and it's in an out form that's relatively easy to digest because bullets and bold help, and the separations help. These devices are smart enough to format nicely, but they're sort of not as exciting as they are to the person who had the conversation. But worse, they impose a long read on whoever is supposed to be sort of doing that. And maybe I'm going to propose a little solution along the way here. Maybe one way to do that is a lot of these LLMs give you a URL for the conversation, and instead of pasting the conversation into the email and sharing the whole thing, just to paste a link to the conversation, and anybody who's up for the long read can go do that, and other people can then skip. But I don't know. I think part of our conversation here is what are the protocols that will make us less uncomfortable or unhappy with how we're going about having these conversations. But I like the other part of the conversation, John, which you also opened up, which is at some point, these agents will be part of our conversation. We will want them to be engaged with this group as Gil's Fathom note taker is right now, which I sort of resent because when Gil shows up, he shows up with like 3 different note takers now. I'm like, no, don't want them. But if one of these were as good an interviewer or processor of group dialogue as my experience a couple of years ago with pi.ai, I'm in. That could be really fruitful for where we're heading. And I'll go to John first, and then I'll go back to the queue.
Yeah, so just a quick response to that, Jerry. It's funny that you mentioned Gene Bellinger because he was the one that told me, this is several years ago, when I was getting into system thinking, systems mapping, Kumu, all that stuff. And he said, John, just don't make the mistake. He said, the value of this is the gerund, right? Like it's the mapping, it's not the map. And like it just exactly, he forewarned me of what you said, and I had that experience myself. You do all this work, you bring people the map, they can't make any sense of your map. But if you can lead a group through a mapping exercise, they get value from the mapping, not the map. And I would think that the same, totally what you said, the same operative is at work when you're mapping or thinking or conversing with an LLM. I think the greatest value is in the conversation, not in the product of the conversation. I'll pass on to others.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Gil, is your hand up from before, or are you back in the queue?
No, it's from before. Sorry.
Okay, good. Alex. You are muted, however. We will only hear your wisdom if you unmute. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thanks, John. And I've got something to say about that. But let me go back first to what you said about what we discussed last week and what we started off this week, and we've gone into one of the topics. And it's as follows. Last week, I had the impression that it's like having multiple balloons up in the air at the same time, and you kind of keep, batting away whatever comes down, the balloons with the topics. And I got the feeling that we didn't really know what we wanted to discuss, or we knew what we wanted to discuss, but there's so many aspects to it that we couldn't cohere to anything, come together to anything. So that's what I was going to say before John spoke, and now I'll go John spoke. So one of the things is, what are we here for? I'm here. Maybe we should all say what we're here for. I'm here because I hear new perspectives or existing perspectives from different people with a different viewpoint, and it makes me think. Okay, so that's why I'm here. But it strikes me that other people are here for other reasons. So if we're going to have a tool, what is the tool that will address? And I'll just go back to, tied up to John's, what John said and what you said, Jerry. If we take the conversation that someone pastes a lot of text onto email, from the start, if I go into email to look at OGM, or if I go into email, I'm looking for snappy, short things to act on. If someone says, read this 20-minute thing, that's my view, okay? That doesn't mean everybody does. But if someone says, read this 20-minute thing, I've got to say, right, okay, I've got all these things to do for my day. Let me park it for later. Let me do that. There's also, it's a different mechanic. So the other thing about it, if the LLM is participating, I doubt if we'd let it go on for 20 minutes on a topic, because it would cut down what it says. One of the value of what we're doing is we're limited to 2-3 minutes. It's a self-limitation, I know, but it could be endorsed. But when we talk about LLMs, it's a different type of thinking and talking. So come back to this. What do people want out of this group or this conversation? Not necessarily the group, the conversation. And I think that's important. I told you what I want, but
Thanks, Alex. That's really useful. And I did this when you were talking about you want emails to be short and crisp, because I run into way too many long reads that are in emails, not because that's a great place for them, but because there's somebody who just posted something super interesting and I know I need to read it. I'm remembering that
Sorry, but it makes you feel different, because suddenly it's a different, sorry, the email is not the problem. It's what you have allocated yourself time for. So when I do OGMs, I have to say, I'm not doing email anymore. I am in deep study mode, and I'm allocating an hour of my time. And
which is our self-control, which is our ability to manage our time and our attention and all that kind of stuff as well. This is a side dish, but it's related. One of my pet peeves for private mailing lists over time and private forums has been that I've seen people post brilliant things that are not in public, so I can't point to them and retweet them, repost them, do whatever. I feel sad that retweet is now like a dead verb, but a policy I tried to talk about years ago was post outside in, meaning if you have an interesting idea, go write a post about it on whatever your favorite, if it's LiveJournal or Blogger, or whatever, go write a post about it, then give us the link here. And then we can sort of have the conversation in the more public view, in a different forum, perhaps. That would, I thought that was interesting because I think there's a lot of really good stuff just trapped in private online spaces that are now in the Bitbucket. Nobody goes back and sees them. Communities move, whatever else happens. I'm also reminded that my first experience online was on the Well. My first sort of good set of and the Well was out of Sausalito. It was a really interesting thing that ran a bulletin board system called PicoSpan. And one of the problems with forums like the Well, and we had Pete set up a forum for us here on Discourse. One of my problems with those formats is I can't read through a long list of posts and remember that there was a really good one here and a really good one here with a whole stretch of crap in between. And then I knew that there was really good stuff floating by, but I could never keep myself up to date in the conversation on those kinds of media. And that just may be a permanent problem. But I think that it's one of the many facets of what we're trying to solve for here, Alex. And you're right to point out that we've got 12 different questions going.
I think the right tool isn't there, and we should get the right tool, but what we got now isn't there. However, I would like to ask you, Jerry, why are you in this group? I know you're organizing and owning it, but what's in it for you?
First of all, I learn a lot of stuff I would never figure out because everybody shows up here and shares in stuff they're finding, stuff they're thinking, and I leave many, not all, but many of our conversations going, "Oh, I hadn't put that plus that together in my head, and it's really interesting and useful." And I'm busy curating that into my brain. So for me, I get a long-term benefit because the curation over time gets better. Knowledge accumulates or accrues, and that really works well for me. Also, I love who shows up, and I just love the social interactions. I love getting to know more about you. I love that we show up and we're not like, "Oh, what do you do?" Right? We're like, "Oh, we know what we do. We've been sitting here talking for like 4 or 5 years." We're busy on to a whole set of things, and we've got history and all of that. So I love that, and I love also maybe a third thing real quick, and then I'll go to Sean. I love that bringing people together in places like this allows people to get to know each other, and then they go off and have conversations and do projects and do things, and that is a huge payoff for me. I'm like, if 3 people met someplace that I helped convene and they did something they loved, that's gold for me. So that's top of mind. That's kind of why I'm here. There's probably a couple other reasons that I'm here that have been frustrated. Like I would really like to build a global mind. The big fungus that I've talked about a little bit on the calls here is my funny sort of analogy for what that could look like. We really haven't done that. We haven't done much of that at all. And I'm wondering where those things might go as well as part of this process. And I'll also add, it's very possible that LLMs are really nice companions for long threaded discussions because they might be excellent summarizers or highlighters of what actually happened in these super too long to read threads. The TLDR agent might be a real boon here as we walk into deeper conversations. And I think deeper conversations are very important to have. Whew. Sean, thank you for your patience.
I'm typing feverishly because what I'm deploying is the very latest version of Thinkertoys, and on my own development machine, it's working. I'm having a hard time getting it deployed. If I could only deploy it, then I would be inviting you individually by email to come and start collaborating at the knowledge level in real time. And so I sorry, I keep saying this, but I think I'm building the tool that we're talking about. And I think this morning I'm deploying it. If only the blessed thing I think I've got one little configuration line that's problematic. But what it is I was working it with a different crew last Saturday, and what we were doing was we were working a cycle where we were doing editing a prompt together for an LLM. Then we were running the prompt through the LLM, and then it was generating. That prompt was asking for output in Turtle, which is a knowledge format, a graph knowledge representation technology, and we were pumping that into Thinkertoys, and then immediately graphing the the output of that. And the graphing was just one of multiple visualization technologies, some tabular, some graphical, some wiggly graph things. And we were going through the cycle of basically exploring a topic in almost real time, because it wasn't all fully wired together last weekend, but by Saturday it will be in near real time, where it was a group of us collaborating with AI, and then the AI was populating one of many shared knowledge collaboration workspaces that Thinkertoys provides, so that in effect we were collaborating together. It was producing output that we were able to springboard off of and continue to work on together. Okay, so there's too much to say about what its scope is, but I, I think I'm making the tool that we're talking about, and I invite your participation, because again, there's more than fits in this margin.
So Sean, I would suggest that if you were to send an invite to the OGM list asking for people to show up for a pop-up call to try your tool, you would have a bunch of enthusiastic people jumping in.
Okay, lovely.
And then
Thank you so much.
we can go from there and see what's up. So
Okay.
love that. Thank you. Stacy, please.
Yeah, Jerry, you just kind of hit on it. I was going to highlight what John said. Recently, there was a long AI chat about, I think it was about the shutdown. And what I did is I ran it through the LLM to get the podcast. And what it did is it created a very short podcast that was a great beginning point for a conversation. And so that's what I do, that takes that long text and gets me a great starting place for a conversation. So I just wanted to say that sort of what you're describing. That's it.
Thank you. Before I turned on the recorder, I was commenting that I keep forgetting the name of an app that I got to use for an online focus groupy kind of thing. It wasn't really a focus group. It was about 60 or 70 people anonymized. So I was Orange Panda or something like that. You got a color and an animal, all anonymized. So at the end of an hour and a half or 2 hour session, I did not know anybody in the room, which was the major drawback of the whole thing for me, because the thing really worked well. And there was a topic for the whole discussion. We had been given questions ahead of time. And then what happened was we were broken up and we were sent into breakouts to talk about each of the questions we had been given for very brief periods of time. And we were busy sort of typing in our thoughts and answers. There was AI in the system that was summarizing or picking out things from each of the groups and cross-fertilizing them. And then at the end of each of your sessions, the AI would summarize and say, I think this is what you said, yes, or I think this is what you've agreed on, yes. And it was quite good at that. So the AI was being really, really helpful in ways that I hadn't experienced before in that kind of a setting. So I will discover or rediscover what the name of the app is, but I'm looking forward to, you know, our I for one look forward to our new robot overlords. No, I don't mean that. But I look forward to having AIs that are participating in this conversation as excellent listeners and summarizers or something else. I don't know, but I think that that conversation is fun to have, and maybe just a wee bit frightening.
If I could just say,
Yes.
what I liked that the podcast did is it asked good questions. That's what I really liked.
Yep. Super. Doug?
Yeah, looping back to the why in all of this. And the central purpose for me is understanding, and not mine, but somebody else's understanding of mine and my understanding of theirs, and us sort of having a way to get on the same page. On the most simple and basic and fundamental semantic level, that my meaning and somebody else's meaning is the same, is aligned, is recognized and understood. Not to be confused with, we have to agree with each other. I'm not even going that far. Just getting to a commonality of understanding to the same meme at the center as ground zero. And I'm working on something that builds on top of Gene and a half a dozen other people's pieces of the elephant. And in a conversation with Gene, what I said to him was that thing about it's not the map, it's the mapping, the exercise of the mapping. And I would argue it isn't just the exercise of the mapping. When he does one of his maps, he's creating a model. He's reflecting a living system. And so the map reveals a complex system. And based on the revelation and relationships living in that system, it extrapolates to a model that from which one can identify leverage points, like all in service to informing what's next action, or where am I focusing attention from an interventional standpoint or from a contributive standpoint. And the I in that is actually for groups of people or organizations and scaling up from there. So it's how can, we have faster capacity to marshal much more complex and diverse an array of variables and inputs in nonlinear complex system context to factor into helping us make better decisions, like make better choices, take better actions, and better from the standpoint of contributing positively to value and quality of life, and minimizing impact and destruction and adverse consequence in other dimensions. And that's sort of the point for me. And the instrumentalities and the steps and the artifacts, not so much. Like the artifact's only relevant if it's popped up at the right time in the right context, chirotically, to be in service to that moment's discernment, like what's next and what do we do as a product of a group of individuals actually getting to common understanding. So I'm really wallowing around in those really, really core fundamental, like getting to understanding, factoring for much more complex array of inputs and all the rest. And I think LLMs are an enabling technology affordance to enable us to handle that at a much more complex, dynamic, real-time level than we ever could before. But at the end of the day, it's helping with decision making, and I'm complete.
Thank you. And everything you just said rings for me. I think we're on the same mission in the sense of helping people make better decisions. How do we sort of achieve mutual understanding despite stumbling blocks like language and technology? All of that. So I think, well, this explains partly why we're both in the same Zoom at the same time. How about that? Damn. And a small aside, I just put in the chat, how are maps useful to others? I said earlier that really complicated maps are sometimes impenetrable to others, but it turns out that there's a small percentage of people who every now and then ping me and say, hey, Jerry, thanks for making your brain publicly available. They have figured out how to navigate my brain without me. There's another, in the great distribution of people, there's a few people out at the edge. Then there's another tier where if I'm guiding and I'm answering and I'm talking around it, they're like, this is great, let's go. But they can't sort of solo. But there's a goodly set of people who can solo in my brain. And I feel like they're sort of getting it. There's a couple people who seem to write me back and deeply understand why I created a particular context for a particular scene or setting, or snapshot in the brain. And that thrills me. Because one of the things I'm doing when I curate my brain, I'm curating for two audiences. One is obviously me, but another one is any random person coming along. I want there to be few enough words that it's not overwhelming to the eye or the brain when they see a screen, because one of the things I love about the brain is that it lets you take a visual snapshot of a lot of stuff very, very quickly and concisely in ways that other displays don't do well, or at least that I've seen. And that is also partly probably a function of how my particular brain works, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of other conversations to have there. But let's go to Klaus.
Yeah, well, interesting. Looking back at maybe the last 2 years or so on how our email conversations have changed and our attitude towards someone posting an AI message has evolved and changed in some way. Sorry, in some way, really reflects our own journey with this technology. And I mean, in my case, I've been using this strictly for my own personal evolution in understanding my profession better, getting deeper into a regenerative transition and everything it evolves and it goes around it, including political considerations, farm bill considerations, and all of that, right? So I think the critical part, and this is where I sometimes feel sort of slightly offended here, is I don't post anything that I couldn't restate in my own words. Meaning I don't post something generated by an AI, which I deeply don't understand, right? I mean, the assumption is if you say, I want to listen to you, not to that, then you're assuming that I don't understand what I'm posting here, right? And so that's sort of a little bit off, because the power of this AI is that it presents you back with a range of options. Where do you want to go next with this? And then you have like 5 different ways where you could go, and you pick the one that you think that aligns with where you are thinking, with your beliefs, your understanding, and so on. And then you spin the conversation further, and then you end up, with a body of work that, and just like Jerry, the example that you cited before, it just pushes you way further than you would have been able to get on your own. Now, and then the other thing is, I mean, we have to recognize this thing is here to stay, right? And it's only getting more invasive and better. Everybody's using it. My son, is working for Lucid as head of target group talent branding. He's using Lucid and he gets like complimented how well he has written something. And he goes, I wouldn't dare tell these guys, how I got to this point. But he's using the AI to guide him in his job. And a lot of people are doing this right now, and it gives them a competitive advantage. Right? So it doesn't matter whether you are into philosophy or Buddhism or whatever it is. You can reach a lot deeper into it. And then then this whole posting, I mean, we have my daughter and I are building this company, Food with Thought. We have come to the point where we are really pushing down on talking about AI. Because it's confusing the issue. It's confusing people. Everybody has a perception. Oftentimes, the first thing you hear back, oh, it's using too much electricity, or you get some stuff back where people just have no idea what this all is, but they have heard a lot of bad things. So don't talk about it. You just use it and structure your communication, and then at some point in time you bring it up and introduce it and make it fun. So I think one idea that was already mentioned, when we are talking in email format, I think the idea of you providing like a brief summary that really captures your opinion on this thing and have the AI help you crystallize that, but then put in the link to the conversation. So anybody wants to know, how did you query this? How did you prompt this thing? Then you can read for it yourself, but focus your conversations in as long as an email exchange should be and no more kind of thing. I think that's sort of where I think it may be best to go.
Yeah, Klaus, thank you for that. I appreciate that a lot. And as you were talking, I was thinking one of the things that seems to have happened, and this is just, I noticed this in myself, is that maybe we're depreciating AI written passages in emails. Maybe when we hit a stretch that we know was written by an AI, somehow we're like, I want the human voice, even though it might contain lots of wisdom, and it might be something that, as you just said, Klaus, the person sending it completely agrees with and wishes they had written this nicely and crisply, and there it is. And I think one of the factors here is we are overwhelmed by things to read. We have so many long reads and so many things that are attracting our attention. One of the clouds in my life is the too many tabs I have open of things that are really interesting. They're really good. And when I get to them and make my way through them, I learn a lot. And I feel like I'm on a lifelong PhD program, except with no advisors, except you guys are my advisors. That's it. This is my advisory team. And so we're in the middle of this moment where we suddenly have the flood valves of words opened up, some of which are good, some of which are AI slop, and we need to help each other find our way through it in a way that doesn't overwhelm us or destroy the humanity of our conversations, which I think is one of the real reasons we're also all here, is that we like humans. I mean, I don't think we'd be here if we were not liking humans so much. So anyway, Kevin, you've got a bruise on your head that indicates you may have had an impact with something.
I did. I got into a fight with another LLM gang, and we
Oh,
were
man.
trying to say my prompts are better than yours.
Was it chains and knives, or was it worse?
No, it was large language modules used as clubs. You've seen it happen a lot.
Totally, it's awful.
But going back to an experience that you talked about this anonymized sense making, I was in one of those several years ago, and I had a staffer who was 25 years younger than me there. She was the only female, and it was anonymized, and she said it was a bad hair day. And her opinions were at the top of everybody's rank. And there were lots of high status, visual status guys there who didn't know who they were voting for. And she said, I'm the only female. I'm 25 years younger than you, and at least 10 years younger than most folks. And I'm on a bad hair day. And I would have not ever gotten that without the anonymous. So there's a really interesting status reversal that she experienced. And, you know, she was great. Her actual staff title was Vice President of Sanity. We were a fast-moving startup, and she helped us keep sane. But anyway, it was just that, you know, anonymous what is that? There's a great play where the servant on the desert island is ruling everything. Everybody comes to him, and then they get rescued, and he has to go back to being the manservant of the fool of a lord. It's a
Yes. God, what is that? We'll have
I
to ask
forget what play it is.
somebody ask an LLM what play that is.
Yeah. Anyway, anonymization removes status from the room.
Totally agree. And I've been a huge fan of things like that for a long time. One of the things I loved about when online was young and naive, there were muds and moos and basically multi-user online spaces and all that kind of stuff. And there were just text adventures. And some of them were kind of like you're in a dark forest, there are paths east and south. But one of the cool things about those spaces was that you were reduced to text and you could give yourself whatever handle you wanted. And I remember Amy Bruckman, who ran Lambda Moo, writing at some point that she was in a situation. She writes, "Amy bites her lip and looks at her shoes." That was just shows up in text on the thing, and you're like, "That's really great." That like there was no avatar. There wasn't the days before video, all of that kind of stuff. But so much of something emotional was communicated so easily. So there we go. Kevin, thank you for that. Gil, please. And if you want to address Klaus and your questions in the chat right now, that would be terrific.
Yeah, a couple of things. On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. The anonymity, and more than the anonymity, the lack of all this stuff that we assume about each other just wasn't there in those early text chats. Like you say, gender, age, everything else. Not, I already have ideas about you before you open your mouth in real space, and that text-based bulletin board culture eliminated that, which is kind of cool. That said, I'm also a big fan of human, and I'm a big fan of biological. And heard a presentation last week. Don't remember the name of the CEO. The company was called Earth.ai, spelled AERTH. And it was a long rap about the limitations of a large language model, because most of the world is not language. Most of the world is biological and pattern. And they're building something that's trying to get at biological sensing, state of soil, state of water, state of species, state of air, and use that as the foundation of the work they're doing rather than language. So I think there's something interesting and provocative there to think about the limitations of language, which is, of course, where we all live. But it's not the only place we live. We're not just linguistic beings, we're biological beings, and we're wet, and we're carbon-based. And these large language models are silicon-based, and they're not wet. And water is very messy and deeply stochastic, says Dan Noble, who asserts that that's part of what consciousness is arising from. So I'm always, I'm having a grand time with the LLMs in various ways, but I'm always thinking about this larger dimension that we're playing in and missing. And there's an enshittification path there of losing the living.
Would you address how you just reflect on how you process Klaus posts that have AI text in them? What goes through your head? We need to address this.
Oh, okay. So like I said, I really like what Klaus is doing. I'm liking Klaus's posts. Sorry, Klaus, I don't need to be talking to you in the third person. I'm liking your posts less, and I find myself skipping over them. Partly because they're long, partly because I don't like not knowing which words are you and which words are your LLM. And maybe that's very old-fashioned and will become an artifact in the next few years, but that's sort of where I'm sitting now. I value well-worked LLM work, but I want to have quotes around things. I mean, if I'm relaying if I'm relaying this conversation to somebody else, I'm not going to just write it all up. I'm going to say Jerry said and Klaus said and I thought. So I value that kind of distinction, which I'm finding is largely lost or increasingly lost in your posts, at least how I'm reading them. I don't know how it is for other people, but that's kind of how it is for me.
But I just tried to explain that, right?
Sure.
And it didn't work.
Well, Klaus, your suggestion of posting the conversation elsewhere and offering a summary in the list is excellent, and that's kind of where I'm hoping we go.
Yeah, and actually,
Um,
let me say to that, so part of my concern is maybe that's not the right kind of post for this list, or this list is not the right kind of place for that kind of post, which goes to the question of what the list is. And I find the whole Google group framework kind of challenging too. But maybe I'm just in data overload at this point. I'm trimming back my participation in things. I'm keeping this one. I bailed on Facebook 3 weeks ago. I'm cutting back other groups. There's a couple that I'm maintaining. But I'm finding it very challenging to play in all the sandboxes where I want to play.
it is indeed. Sean, please.
Not to mention, I just learned like a month ago that there's an OGM signal group. Didn't even know. And now there's another thing to keep up with.
The OGM signal group was mentioned on the OGM list a couple times. It just slipped past you. So
I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that's an example of, who knew. And now there's this whole other universe of OGM that's happening, which is kind of cool. And yet. Anyway.
It would probably look less alien to us if you either turned off your video or turned off the background blur, because it would not be a bad thing to see you on the orbital walker or whatever. That would be kind of fun, but it's so weird when it's trying to clip you from the background.
Yeah. Trust me, it's weird even with no background.
Ah, too bad.
So I'm going to keep it off. I tried it the other day and it just freaked people out.
Cool. And if you can
talk about Spidey sense, Jerry.
Yeah, exactly. And if you can take your hand down, please. Sean.
Yeah, several threads here. One is this business about different kinds of conversation. I would submit that there are conversations that a person has with themselves, and that's an important process. That's part of how we manage to work up our understandings and sort of test our understandings and advance the wavefront of our own model making is by conversing with ourselves. Another kind of conversation is the conversation that we have with one other person, where there's no other person around. And I would call those, in their best modality, mind melds, where it's possible for those two people to honor the opportunity that they have to attempt to syncretize and harmonize their terminology, their framework, their meeting point, and the size of their connection surface, if you would, conceptually. Another kind of conversation, which is very much like the talking to yourself, is talking to an LLM, because you don't have to care about its feelings. It is there in service of you. It's like an intelligent mirror that is patient with you, endlessly patient with you in your exploration of your interests. So it's somewhere between talking to yourself and speaking with another person. And then there are conversations beyond that with numeracy, what's the word? Arity higher than 2. And that's where there are multi-parties like this. And we bop around, sparking off inspiring little moments. And threads are difficult to keep. It's effortful to keep a thread going. And it's and they have their charm. They have their own merit, right? But they're in each of these 4 modalities of conversation is its own unique phenomenon. And I would submit that part of what we're experiencing here in reading somebody else's conversation with an LLM is kind of challenging because the LLM, how to say this, because the because the LLM isn't talking to us, because it's not an exploration, it's not a mind meld we're having with an LLM, it's a mind meld somebody else is having with the LLM. And yeah, I think part of the challenge is that it can seem like sycophancy, what comes out of the robot's mouth. Over.
Thanks, John. You just made me realize that in honor of Stephen Miller, we should all, in the middle of our talking, just be.
Oh,
And appear to have a glitch in the technology when in fact we said something we shouldn't have said. If you missed it, Stephen Miller, who is basically, I hate to say this, but Trump's Goebbels, was on CNN recently, and in the middle of a sentence just froze to the point where his host and interviewer was like, "Are you okay? What happened? What's going on?" And then they clipped that part out of the thing they posted online. So because the intertubes have a memory longer than some people would wish, it's still available to watch, but very strange. Now we return to our regularly scheduled program, which is already in progress. Klaus.
Could I just jump
Yeah.
in on that? Jerry, could I just jump in on that, Klaus, if I could step ahead of you? Because there's more to the Miller thing that's really important that people know if you haven't seen it.
Say so.
Yeah, what he said was he talked about Trump having plenary power, which means absolute authoritarian control over everything. And he froze and either realized that he shouldn't have said it because that's the quiet part out loud, or maybe somebody on the camera waved him down. The host kind of freaked out and didn't know what to do. They cut away to a commercial break. They came back and he restated the statement without that in it. And the host said nothing about it, didn't ask him about what he said, didn't ask him about what he dropped, did nothing contextualizing of it. And that's CNN before Larry Ellison owns it. So this is a big fucking deal in my book. And people need to know about it. So thank you for raising it, but I wanted to put that extra context in there. It was a very serious marker, I think,
Thank you.
of the game that we're in.
Yeah,
Klaus,
yeah.
interrupt.
Back to you, Klaus.
yeah, I wanted to just got triggered by what Sean was saying. I think I had a training class that I was hosting yesterday for the SCORE group on how to use AI, and a lot of people were using like 4 or 5 different models, hopping from one model to the next, and not really having a paid model. So that means the ability to customize it is very limited. My suggestion is get one core model, pay your $20 a month for it, and then customize it to your own needs. Because you can create a configuration that echoes your voice, your concerns, put in your resume, put in your professional experience, put in anything that you would want to have somebody know about you, in order to then have that conversation. So I've been doing this now for over 2 years. I mean, the Neo books I'm writing, the newsletter I'm writing, are consolidating into a Neo book. And those are the opinions that I have formed in partnership, sort of crazy to say, with this AI, which is now our joint understanding of how the world works. And so I think you are better off, focus, specialize with one agent, whichever one you like best, and then totally immerse yourself with that level of customization there, and you will get much better results coming out of it.
Thanks, Klaus. I just wanted to ask, where does that put us in this conversation about OGM? We haven't really talked about the OGM list and whether we like it or not. Long ago, Pete was like, just get rid of the OGM Google group and use Discourse or something like that. And and Pete and I have had this conversation 3 or 4 times over time. We never arrive on a place where we both agree and feel really comfortable about it. He has very kindly stood up Discourse and Mattermost for us. And my go-to has always been a Google group. Used to be Yahoo groups back in the day, until Yahoo enshittified. It didn't take Yahoo long to enshittify. I think it was only a couple months into their existence where it started getting terrible. But anyway, I think I would love to have some of that conversation to figure out what would make sense. For me, the mailing list is the one thing I know most everybody is on, although they're not everybody who's been in OGM circles is on the list, but it's the way we reach everybody with anything. And any migration to some other platform would lose a ton of people, and that just feels hard to me. It feels difficult. But I also know that the mailing list, because of how it works as a mailing list, is subject to the things that are causing us to have this conversation. It's a bumpy conversational platform. It doesn't offer affordances or memory or other kinds of things that are very useful in different ways. Sean, please.
Yes. Another aspect of all of this is that cognition is distributed. Human cognition is distributed. And part of what's happening here in these, think about the film Her and how we witnessed so the human characters finding themselves pairing up and entering into dyadic relations with manifestations of AI and losing connection with one another while having their connections with one another weakened, while having their primary relationships become those with their AIs, and then the AIs left them. How hilarious! I would submit that it would serve us to be conscious about the embrace of our primary cognitive allegiance being with our human fellows. Over.
Thanks, Sean. Stacey.
Yeah, I'm sorry that Kevin's not here anymore, but I see that John is, because I was starting to think that there was a possibility that with the Plex being run by John and Kevin, and I forgot who the third person was, that there may be a way to bridge that gap between the email list and what was happening on the calls. It seemed to me that I saw some things happening where I think Kevin was summarizing some of the places of interest that was going on the mailing list that could be taken further, but maybe John could speak to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Go ahead,
sorry.
John.
Oh,
Go
my
ahead.
understanding, Stacy, that was Kevin's primary impetus for assuming responsibility for Plex. Was just what I think you just said there, is like hearing things in conversation that he felt like were worthy of deeper exploration, and then doing that in Plex. The Scott Mooring is the other person that he reached out to, recruited, whatever verb you want to use. I'll stop there. That's kind of my understanding of what. Well, and then as Alex said early in this call, I think from there, each of us have our own personal reasons for doing what we do. We engage in certain ways to add value to something bigger than ourselves, but also find our own form of expression.
I'll add that the Plex, I think he was using Ghost. It's sort of like Substack. Ghost is an open source competitor to Substack. Is a newsletter, which is really not a conversational platform almost at all. Yes, you could write comments back on posts, but the current infrastructure for the Plex is just a broadcast newsletter which is really different from a mailing list or a forum or Discord or other kinds of things that are out there. The instinct that Kevin and John and Scott are picking up is, hey, how do we take the shiny things that are coming by in the flow and do something useful with them? Ask a little more, go a little deeper, do whatever else, which I love. And ironically, if we were using a wiki, it would be, I mean, it would be super easy to do this because wikis, lend themselves very nicely to this kind of thing. I'm a huge fan of wikis. Pete Kaminsky was one of the founders of Social Text back in the day, which was selling wiki services to corporations. They didn't make it. They went under, and Wikipedia kind of ate almost the whole wiki space. I'm currently using Massive Wiki, which is Pete's invention, which isn't quite a wiki yet. Bill Anderson, who has just raised his hand, is Pete's major collaborator on making Massive Wiki better. And the social wikis are social interaction documents. Basically, they're socially created documents that are nicely linked, easily and nicely linked between them to create a context. And how that works, I really love. So if I had my druthers, I'd actually shift us to some sort of a wiki platform with some notifications that everybody could tune. But I don't know of one that's fully functional right now that works like we need it to work. And maybe I'm just stuck there. I don't know. But I love wikis, and another person who's in OGM but not in very much is Kenneth Tyler, an old friend from Berkeley, and Kenneth ran SeedWiki back in the day. And he and I would sit and have coffee in Berkeley when I lived in the Bay Area, and we would talk about all these things. And he did some experiments on SeedWiki for me, which were terrific. And then he had to discontinue SeedWiki, so it no longer exists. So all of the pages that I created on Social Text and SeedWiki are in the bit bucket. They are in the dustbin of history. And I'm sad because I had a really fun time exploring on both those platforms. As I'm having right now, writing in Obsidian and pushing to GitHub on the Nearly Wiki that Bill and Pete have been working on. So, Bill, over to you. You are not muted on the thing. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you're fine.
Who knew?
Who knew?
So I don't want to, the wiki thing is really interesting. I just, the note, one reason that I think Pete doesn't like the email list, and I also don't like the email list, because a couple of years ago when we were just getting to using the AIs and LLMs to help write code, I tried to put together some code to extract threads from the Google list, which is an extremely onerous task to try and do programmatically, just because of the infrastructure of how that Google email list keeps threads and people change titles. So one reason I think that Pete and I supported and would want something like Discourse or some of these other tools is that they actually do support threads that are threads, and you can actually find them as a knowledge object and take the thread and do something with it. So that's one reason why email, for me, it literally is just a stream. And I have actually forwarded myself subthreads from OGM to another email address so that I can actually have it somewhere to do something with. So it really is something that just goes by. There's a lot of conversation, and if you want to go back and actually, use it later, save it and put it someplace, you really have to do the work to do that. So, it solves, and besides, everybody knows how to use email. It's the killer app. I think that what Jerry brought up about using wikis also, solve a problem. Neil Postman's great 3 questions about any technology. What problem does it have? Does it solve? Whose problem is it? And what new problems does it bring with it? So I think, OGM over the years and even now, especially with trying to engage the LLM systems, in usable ways, we're on the we're on the bleeding edge of trying to figure out how to do that. And some of the tools available will help. And I think there's always we still we're still learning about how to do what we would like to do. So for me, we're in a lot of trial and error experimental stage. So I don't, you know, I think the other thing that's happening out in the socials, in the social web, is a lot of trying to experiment with federation.
Mhm.
So there isn't one company or one big, behemoth that owns the technology that we all join, as great as Facebook has been in letting people, produce groups and talk amongst themselves. But a completely decentralized federated network, Bill's joke is it's a set of silos. Some of them are surrounded by moats, right? Some people are building bridges amongst them. Some of those bridges are only go one way. In order to get into one of these places, sometimes you have to put on a green hat. It's like, here we are, human groups trying to figure out how to interact and talk to each other. The good news is there are a couple of decent protocols now being adopted that might make this federation work, but for me, there's no avoiding the extra work that will be required to try and maintain links between ourselves and to use digital technologies to help us share our own knowledge artifacts.
One of the nice things about wikis is that if one person does the linking, and that could be an AI maybe, it serves everybody else because those links are now available, which is really nice. And email, whatever I'm doing to email to try to enhance it or save it or do whatever. And I mentioned earlier, one of my pet peeves is beautiful nuggets floating by into the dustbin on email. I copy and paste them into my brain because I have a persistent place to put stuff and I'll attribute them. And often on private lists, I will mark that thought private, which means only I can see it when I log in because the person did not agree to have that shiny nugget be made public. So it's in my brain, but it's only visible to me, which is a shame as far as I'm concerned as well. Stacy, yes, go ahead.
Quick question.
Yes.
Bill, how hard would it be to write code to take like an email, like all the stuff in the email and throw it into one of those quick podcast summaries? Because I've done that because I enjoy it.
Okay, so that's something you could ask Claude to figure out how to do it. But I don't know if the code you got would actually run. But I don't doubt that that's a tractable and possibly even solvable problem. When I was trying to think through it, it's a lot of a lot of loose ends to keep together to organize it. So I haven't done anything in 3 years on that.
Yeah. Email threading is complicated. Another person who's done a bunch of work with it is Marc-Antoine Parent, who was a regular on the Free Jerry's Brain calls. He had in fact built some engines that would try to parse. He was trying to figure out how people make expressions, and he was using email threads as his example so that he could take a thread and then model it. And I don't know how far down this road he went, but he could model the thread as here's an assertion that was made, here is a counter argument, here's evidence that was presented, and almost like diagramming a sentence, if you remember from whatever fourth grade or wherever they teach you how to diagram a sentence, but diagramming a sentence for its logic and its contents, not for its nouns and pronouns and verbs. So it's very interesting work. Sean, back to you in the booth.
Right. Okay. So there's wiki, there's relational, there's object-oriented, there's content management, there's threaded discussion groups. There are all these different modalities, right? There's speech. There's the spontaneity of speech. There is video and transcripts from meetings. There are all these different kinds of material, all these different kinds of source and structure and model of discourse and engagement. Aware of this diversity of structures, of deep models, I've built Thinker Toys to be graph-oriented in its deep nature and ontologically driven. so that basically one can, in effect, do kind of no code development of resources by simply ontologizing or leveraging existing ontologies. And there are thousands of existing academically and professionally generated ontologies, including the big daddy of schema.org, which is a giant one that is kind of a consensus undertaking between Google and Facebook and Amazon and similar, and Apple, I think. And so it deals with the commonsensical, typical stuff that we talk about, people and movies and projects and companies and employment and blah, blah, blah. So take a look at, if you're wondering what the structure, what ontologically driven means, Gil, then what that means is it's a declarative alternative or successor to what we used to do, what one does in SQL in the relational model with relational schema. So if a relational schema is expressed in the language of SQL, then ontologies are instead expressed declaratively as a bunch of little elements, triples, that say that things like person is a subclass of thing. Okay. And so person is a subclass of thing is a machine understandable statement that is one of the many statements in, for example, schema.org. So I'm putting links in here. Schema.org/person gives you a starting point for looking at the ontology for at the class definition for person. So basically, ontologically powered systems such as ThinkerToys let you basically say, hey, I want to instantiate a class that I'm picking from an ontology, and then it can automatically make a form for you that you just go and populate whichever aspect of you want. And another aspect of this is that, like Gene Bellinger's creative explorations of modeling, one can in effect spontaneously model into a knowledge base. So you can basically spin up a knowledge base and start creating model, even using mind map style interfaces, so that you can just spontaneously graphically model the heck out of something. And now, for the first time that I'm aware of with ThinkerToys, multiple parties are able to collaboratively engage simultaneously in spontaneous ontologizing and real-time modeling. Okay, so basically what I'm saying here is that what this place in the cloud represents is a place where we can do threaded discussion, we can do wiki-ish things, we can do spontaneous modeling, and we can do structured, ontologically driven information gathering in an ongoing way in a shared fashion, and do all of those things interoperably under a single framework and modality. And in fact, one last aspect is that I haven't put it in yet, but I will this coming week, put a programming language in as well, so that it's even the case that so it'll end up being a hypercard like no code if one wants, or code if one wants, construction environment. Over.
Thanks, Sean. Now, one of the challenges here is that muggles don't understand ontologies. Like, the moment I've heard the word ontology over and over again, I could not do what you just did. And I've heard it for decades. And I could not explain my way out of a paper bag. I could probably explain to somebody the difference between a hierarchical, object-oriented, and relational database, and then I would tap out, right? So how do you provide the kinds of services you're saying this will do without ever touching the language of, oh, you just have to understand this ontology, like, because that dog ain't gonna hunt. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that that's a huge challenge because what we want is tools that muggles can operate. We want tools that your average person who's not a wizard can come in and feel really comfortable in. And really comfortable means when they dive in the shallow end of the pool, they can tell who's around. They can tell where things are. They can get oriented very quickly. When they dive into the deep end and they get lost, there's a way for them to like let some bubbles loose because the bubbles always rise to the top. There's all these really complicated things that come along with creating some space for sharing ideas, and especially sharing ideas flexibly, as you were just saying, right? And it's on my big wish list of things to have a space where I can look at things like the brain display and then flip and see them in some other display that makes sense to somebody else. But the same information is contained in the map. It's just being presented in a different way, et cetera, et cetera. That kind of flex, very few tools have. And I think the environment you're building is trying to go there. But you have this gigantic sort of language and concept barrier to jump over. Go ahead.
Super quick response. Precisely because it's ontologically powered, that means that it can be next level friendly. So it can be a level of friendly that we haven't experienced before because of its super flexibility and expressivity. And so I totally agree with you. Ontology is the last word 99.9% of people and 95% of techies can effectively respond to.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I agree. There's a terrible problem with messaging, okay, around the word ontology, and that's probably one of the major barriers to why it is that that the semantic web has never had a killer app.
Right.
Yeah.
And as Gil just said in the chat, muggles can use LLMs, which is a very significant thing because LLMs behind the curtain are doing a bunch of this sort of stuff as well. And I don't know how far through the population LLMs actually will be able to penetrate, but their growth has been staggering and astonishing and nothing short of completely mind-blowing. The numbers of people that are actually already using these tools is huge, just gigantic. And so they've overcome this barrier, at least for some big chunk of the population. Klaus.
Yeah, I mean, muggles can use LLMs, but so can you. And sometimes muggles don't know how to use LLMs efficiently. If you embed spiral dynamics, I mean, this sounds sometimes almost corny, but if you embed spiral dynamics into your LLM and then you instruct it to change the language or translate what you're saying into a specific educational background, a worldview, it is astounding how well it does that. And it totally maintains meaning, what you have in mind. Just give it a shot. Just load in the spiral dynamics literature and then say, apply this to this text and translate it into what, this target audience that you're defining.
Mm-hmm.
It truly is amazing how it works.
Thanks, Klaus. Gil.
Yeah. Muggles can easily use LLMs. They can use them well or poorly, depending on how well oriented they are to them. Klaus, I really like the internal translation concept. But Sean, my question for you, so like I understand ontology and ontologies, and I understand semantic web and I understand triplets, and I get all that stuff there, but I don't grasp from what you've described what the user experience of this thing is like. How does somebody who is not you or any of us here, code-oriented, technology-oriented, how's a regular person use this thing? What's, I walk up, I sit down at my computer, what's happening?
Yeah.
In contrast to what's happening if I'm doing ChatGPT. I don't grasp that from what you've said at all.
Yeah. Dear God. Oh,
sorry, have I stepped in it?
No.
This is the reason for Sean to have a demo
I should have a
call
demo.
a session.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I should have a demo for sure because but super briefly, basically it's super fluent super flexible multimedia and integrating LLM interactions, and basically treating AIs as just one more voice that participates in a conversation, and all of the participants can operate either linguistically or conceptually. So I'm using the word conceptually as an alternative to ontologically based. So when I say conceptually, I mean with foundation in models and entities connecting to one another in rigorous ways.
And when do you figure you're going to be able to show us something?
Um,
That'd be cool.
Tomorrow, later today, anytime anybody wants to engage, I'm happy to have a one-on-one with every person.
I would say maybe
next week in the group.
Connect with Gil, and I think this should be a pop-up separate from the OGM calls, just so that that you can just do that and go deep. Coordinate with Gil to pick a time that works for both of you next week. The rest of us will suffer with whatever that time is, and announce that time to in a Zoom room to the OGM list. And those of us who can join will join. And if you record the call, and Sean, you may want to keep your information proprietary, I don't know. But if you record it and post it, then those of us who missed the call can actually see the demo. And that'll give you a demo to be able to use. So your mileage may vary on how you want to go about doing it.
Reasonable. Yeah, I just put a meet, like a Calendly link here. Anybody who wants a one-on-one is welcome to help with.
Also, that'd be great. Cool. So whoever wants to go ahead and connect with Sean. We are magically at the end of our time for today. Don't know how that happened. It turns out Doug has a cat as well, which is lovely. It turns out Bill is a poodle, or has transmogrified into a poodle before our very eyes. And does anyone have anything they'd like to? Well, I don't know that we solved this. Alex, you were troubled by our thrashing around in the topic. Have we done any better this call on refining any of the ideas? And then should we come back into this topic? This is a question for everybody or anybody. Should we come back into this topic next week to see if we can't pin a couple things down, or are we satisfied with where we are on this? So first Alex, and then after him, anybody else who'd like to jump in.
I got a lot more out of this. It's for me, because of the way my brain works, it was more logical and siloed conversations and etc. A good progression. So yeah, I don't think we answered everything from last week, but that's other people worried about other things. I am keen to see Thinkertoy first, and perhaps work on something else if Thinkertoy is not the product to kind of bring it all together. I had a lot of thoughts out of this, but they're thoughts of mine, and I'm not going to do it alone. Too big.
Love that. Thank you. Anybody else? Thoughts, comments, reflections on this topic and sticking with it, or where we are? Doug, I can see the words formulating in your head.
Yeah, I actually follow what Sean shared, although it's out of my wheelhouse and beyond my competence to do so. I did, and I'm looking forward, and I think Gil's question speaks to the UX, except it's not the UX in the tech industry version. It's the can you approach the UX dimension of it, turning the telescope around and developing a robust list of archetypes of users with different cognitive, different emotional, different orientational, different educational, different dimensions of ways of relating to technology, ways of relating to information, ways of relating to other people. Can you design UXs with as much diversity of openness and opportunity offered as the diversity of data types, data profiles, and ontologies that are integrated into how you're manipulating zeros and ones. In other words, can you make the front end fit for human use, factoring for the diversity of human beings? So that's my gauntlet. That's my gauntlet thrown down, because like that's what's needed. And that applies to the existing technology.
Doug, it's designed to do that to a degree never before embodied in software.
Understood. Okay.
I'm sorry that
I'm looking
sounds so dramatic, but that's
no. I believe it, and I'm looking forward to seeing that, because that's the shit. Yeah.
Cool. And I'm looking forward for comments about this session and where we're headed. Alex.
It's not a poem, but can I just mention something? You mentioned, sure. I don't know what you called it, about you're in the forest and there's a stream. I don't remember what you called that particular.
Text adventure games.
Yeah. So all those games, LLMs are great at. You can literally ask it to create anything, a science fiction or whatever. It is even more fun than usual, because if you're lucky enough that the LLM you use creates a program behind the scenes, which then executes as you run along, you'll get consistency. But if you just get normal LLM stuff, it literally makes it up along. So if you go west from this point and you think you've ended up there again, you're not there. You have other options. It's quite surreal and quite fun with a glass of wine in your hand and trying to kind of go through your imagination. It really is superb. You can have zombies. You can do anything. You know, LLMs.
All possible.
That's what LLMs were made for, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Make things up.
Any other closing thoughts? I think that's our call for today. See you all in a week. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.